Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Xony, and today we're going to have some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go. Today, I'll share with you guys how I brought my own wedding to a screeching halt. When I read my vows, my fiance and I met in a group setting through coworkers. One of our friends was a man named David. He was my best friend, so it was really nice that he got along with the girl I started dating and eventually proposed to. He quickly agreed to be my best man at the wedding. When my fiance found out, she was really happy and said it would be perfect. I suspected her jitteriness a little bit, but not enough to ask about it. She was friends with him too, after all. Well, fast forward to the week before our wedding. My soon-to-be bride was really excited and had been on her phone a lot. I assumed it was all wedding-related planning because she'd be on her phone and send me in my tracks to ask what I prefer between the two choices. These choices didn't really matter to me, but I answered to make her happy. Now that I know what I know, I think she would make up things to ask me so that I wouldn't suspect her of communicating with another man. My best man, to be specific. She and I held our bachelor parties on the same. It was extremely disappointing to me when my best man called me to let me know he couldn't attend the bachelor party he planned for me. He told me his mother was in the hospital unexpectedly, and he needed to be there with her. Well, this was totally forgivable, right? How could I be so heartless to deny or suspect him? I still had several friends with me throughout the night. I'm an active guy, so we all played basketball outside before getting cleaned up real nice and going to an upscale lounge downtown. I felt like royalty, and I hoped my fiance was feeling the same way. We were actually already living together at this point, but we agreed to abstain from intimate the month before the wedding. I had no idea how difficult that was going to be. We took turns each night sleeping on the pull-out bed in the living room. When I arrived home at night, my fiance was already home and crashed. She looked like an angel that parted for the first time tonight. I tucked her in while she slept, but as I looked around, I noticed something shiny on the floor by the edge of the bed. I picked it up and held it in my hand. Looking closely, it was a fancy gold cufflink. How interesting! My wheels immediately started turning. My woman did not own any cufflinks, and I only owned one pair that did not look like this one. That could mean another man was in our bedroom. I started impulsively rubbing my face, head, and neck. This was stressful. Just then, my fiance's phone went off. It was set to vibrate only, but I could hear it on the nightstand. While she slept, I stood beside her and read her messages. The string that stood out to me was the one with my best man. The most recent text was from him 4 hours earlier, at 9:00 p.m. As I scrolled up, I realized she invited him to her bachelorette party. Even though that wasn't normally how these things worked, further up was much worse. She told him that tonight was going to be their night, because the next day she would belong to me. He asked her if he'd ever be able to have her again. She said if he tempted her too much, he might get away with it. Messages from months ago showed how their conversation went from strictly friends to flirty. He started asking about her body, and she started showing him. They made arrangements to hang out one day a day that I thought she was at work, and then he messaged her asking if they should have done that. She replied with, "I've never been more sure of anything just like that." Within 1 hour, I went from a blissful man about to be married to a broken-hearted, full plotting revenge. I sent myself 6 screenshots of the worst messages they sent, obviously escalating in severity. My plan was to read these messages when I was supposed to read my vows. This was going to be terrible. Just like what she did to me was terrible. I deleted all traces of me collecting evidence. Then I took some equal and crashed. The next morning, she was already gone. She left me an old-fashioned handwritten note that said she left early to get her hair and makeup done. Imagine getting all dressed up only for someone to announce that you're a cheater in front of all your friends and family. What a great day. At this point, I was only bitter. I didn't miss her or want her to be sorry. I was ready to dump her because I couldn't believe how much she let me love her. She was my only one, and I was one of two. I got dressed really nicely. I smelled wonderful, and my hair was never so on point. A part of me felt like it was for nothing, but I convinced myself it was worth it. I thought about warning my dad about what I planned to do, but I didn't want him to convince me not to or warn other people. Just then, my best friend texted me to ask if I was on my way to the venue. As soon as I got there, he greeted me outside. He was dressed really nicely, but the only thing I wanted to know was if he had cufflinks and a gamble. I pretended to notice he was missing one, even though I couldn't really tell. He was surprised I noticed and looked embarrassed. He said it must have got caught on something somewhere because he lost it. I asked to see the one he had up close in case I happened to find the match. At this point, his heart was trying to get out of his chest. He was sweating. I was so amused by this, but played dumb. He showed me the cufflink, and it was an exact match to the one I found and had in my pocket that very moment. I looked up at him very seriously for a few agonizing seconds. I was trying to send OP myself from screaming or punching him. He could see it and asked me if I was okay. I snapped myself out of it and plastered on a fake smile. I told him of course I was okay. I was getting married today. I slapped him so hard on the back that it made him jump. I just walked into the venue after the mind-numbing mingling and grand procession. I realized I never wanted to have a traditional wedding ever again. It all seemed so stupid and meaningless. That's when my would-be wife walked down the aisle. She was as beautiful as ever, and all the memories of how we met and how long we'd been together poured into my head. It was extremely unfair, and I sobbed. People around me seemed to notice that I wasn't happy crying. I was devastated. I barely controlled my sobs until the point where the celebrant asked me if I'd like to read my vows. This was it. I started reading messages between James and my fiance. I mentioned the date and time of each one. It was just odd at first for everyone to be waiting patiently for me to get to the point. But then, as they listened, I started to read messages that were flirty and not something either of them would be proud of. They started to shift uncomfortably and looked around, noticing that everyone in the building was staring at them. My bride asked me what I was doing and what I was reading. After another text, she told me to send OP. Then I read the really inappropriate messages telling her he needed to bury himself inside her again, and her telling him to come over because I left the house. By now, everyone was talking amongst themselves, and my fiance was trying to grab my phone from me. My best man suddenly walked out, but he was followed by 5 of my groomsmen. As she tried to grab my phone, I shouted that I had pictures and videos they'd send each other if anyone wanted to see them. That's when people started getting up and leaving. The celebrant asked if we were still getting married, and I laughed loudly and sarcastically. My ex was now on her knees in her white dress, sobbing at the altar. Her bridesmaids had no idea what to do. They just stood there, frozen. Some of them might have known she was sleeping with him, or at least saw them being flirty. It was great to see that no one rushed her side to help her feel better. I went outside to see what had become of my best man. His car was trapped between the 5 men. They were yelling and screaming at him in disbelief that he would betray me as he did. At this point, I was done with all the drama. My head hurt. I felt like I got the revenge I wanted and just needed to take a nap. I told them to back off and let him go, that keeping him here wasn't going to help anything. Just as they backed off, my wood bride came running out of the venue. She was being chased by her bridesmaids as they shunned her, calling her a terrible person. She ran behind the best man's car for about 10 yards before he saw her in the mirror and stopped. She got in and they left. I turned around and saw a majority of our wedding guests watching what just happened. Many of them walked up to me and offered me hugs and words of advice. It was weird. It was like I was suddenly in a grief counseling session with a mixture of our family and friends. Well, they weren't her friends anymore. Neither of them received support or contact from the people they once relied on and knew so well. They moved out of state together, but only lived together for 1 year. After that, my ex moved back in with her disappointed and criticizing parents. What a gigantic waste of time. She tried to ask me out again after all this, and I called her crazy. I still haven't heard from my best friend, but that's fine. I couldn't be friends with him anymore anyway. My friends and family never let me give up hope or get too depressed. I haven't started dating again, but I know a good girl I'm going to ask out. It's hard to believe that someone would be with me and only me. That's because my ex planted a seed of doubt. The only way I know to fight, to take my time getting close to people, ask them anything I want to know, and tell them what's happened to me so they understand where I'm coming from.